The most devastating moment in Oscar Piastri's Formula One career didn't happen during a high-speed crash. It didn't happen in the pit lane. It didn't even happen during a wheel-to-wheel battle for position. No, the moment that truly broke Piastri's Hungarian Grand Prix happened in a place no driver ever expects to face their biggest defeat, the social media feed of a rival driver. And what happened next left the entire Formula One community stunned. But before we get to that, let's rewind, because the Hungarian Grand Prix was supposed to be McLaren's day. Oscar Piastri had done everything right. He'd taken the lead on the opening lap, passing his own teammate Lando Norris in a move that showcased exactly why McLaren invested so heavily in this young Australian talent. The team had two cars at the front. The championship was within reach. Everything was going according to plan. And then lap 38 happened. Now here's where things get interesting. Piastri was leading the race. He was on course for what should have been his most dominant victory of the season. But as he approached turn 2 at the Hungaroring, he encountered traffic. And that traffic came in the form of Carlos Sainz, who was having his own battle down in 17th position with none other than Fernando Alonso. For a moment, let's think about what Sainz was doing. The Williams driver was fighting tooth and nail for 17th place. Not points, not glory, just the sheer pride of finishing ahead of the legendary Alonso. And in that fight, Sainz drifted across the racing line right as the race leader approached. The contact was inevitable, the damage was immediate, and for Oscar Piastri, the dream of a Hungarian Grand Prix victory vanished in a cloud of carbon fiber dust. But here's the thing about Formula One. The crash itself was just the beginning. What happened after the race ended was far more dramatic than anything that occurred on the track. Because Carlos Sainz went to social media and he made a claim. And that claim, well, let's just say the internet had some thoughts about it. Sainz posted on X, formerly known as Twitter, explaining his side of the story. And according to him, the collision wasn't entirely his fault. He wrote that he had a strong race, but there was an issue with the blue flag system. He claimed Piastri appeared in his blind spot while he was battling Fernando Alonso, and that's when the cars touched. He talked about losing ground with the penalty and the double stacking under the virtual safety car. He even ended with that classic athlete line, "Lots of homework, we'll come back stronger." On the surface, it sounds like a reasonable explanation, a driver acknowledging a mistake, but also pointing to external factors, a system failure, a blind spot, bad luck. These are things racing drivers deal with every weekend. But then something remarkable happened, something that has never happened to Carlos Sainz in his entire Formula One career. The X community decided to correct the record, and they did it in spectacular fashion. A community note appeared on Sainz's post, and this wasn't just any community notes. This was the Formula One equivalent of a public shaming in the town square. The note read, "The FIA stewards determined that the team informed Sainz of the blue flags for car 81 and held him fully responsible for the collision, applying a 5-second penalty despite a mitigating factor of limited visibility." Let's break down what this actually means, because the implications are massive. First, the stewards had already investigated the incident during the race. They had access to all the telemetry, all the onboard cameras, and all the driver communications. And what did they find? They found that Sainz's team had informed him about the blue flags. They told him Piastri was approaching. They gave him the warning that every driver receives when a faster car is about to lap them. And despite that warning, Sainz still drifted across the racing line. He still caused the collision. He still ruined Piastri's race. Now, I want you to imagine being Carlos Sainz for a moment. You're a professional Formula One driver. You've won races. You stood on podiums. You've proven yourself against the very best in the world. And you just had one of the worst weekends of your career. You finished 18th. Your rival, Fernando Alonso, beat you. The race leader whose race you ruined is Oscar Piastri, a young driver whom many consider the future of the sport. And then you go to social media to explain yourself, hoping to get some sympathy, maybe a little understanding from the fans. And instead of support, you get a community note. The internet didn't just disagree with Sainz. The internet fact-checked him, publicly, humiliatingly. And the response was immediate. Fans flooded the post with comments. "My guy, they cooking you with the community note," one person wrote. Another added, "Damn, Carlos, you got a penalty and a community note?" These weren't just casual observations, these were calculated burns that perfectly captured the absurdity of the situation. But here's what makes this story truly fascinating. The sheer number of views on that post exceeded 520,000 at the time of recording. 500,000 people witnessed a Formula One driver get publicly corrected by a platform's community moderation feature. 500,000 people watched the Formula One driver's attempted excuse get dismantled by anonymous internet users armed with facts. Now, let's talk about Oscar Piastri for a moment, because his story in this whole situation is genuinely heartbreaking. Piastri had done everything right. He had taken the lead, he had controlled the pace, he had shown why McLaren paid a fortune to secure his services. He was on his way to what would have been his most significant victory of the season. And then a driver fighting for 17th place ruined it all. But wait, there's more, because Piastri didn't just lose the race. Lose positions. He ultimately retired from the race entirely. The gearbox had been compromised in the collision. The damage was too severe. The race that should have been his was over. Meanwhile, Lando Norris went on to win the race. It was his first victory of the season. He was joined on the podium by Max Verstappen in second and Kimi Antonelli in third. And somewhere, Oscar Piastri was watching from the garage, wondering what could have been. Now, let's think about the bigger picture here. This incident at the Hungarian Grand Prix isn't just about one collision. It's about the changing nature of accountability in professional sports. It's about how athletes can no longer control their narratives the way they used to. Years ago, Carlos Sainz would have given his explanation to the media. Some journalists would have reported it. Some fans would have believed him. Others wouldn't have. But the debate would have been contained. It would have been managed. Today, anyone with an internet connection can fact-check a professional athlete in real time. The community doesn't just watch the sport. The community participates in the accountability process. And when a driver tries to shift blame away from themselves, the community is there to remind them of the truth. This is both terrifying and beautiful in its own way. Terrifying because no one is safe from public scrutiny. Beautiful because the truth has a chance to emerge, regardless of how much money or influence a person has. But let's be honest about something. The community note wasn't wrong. It was accurate. It was based on official FIA determinations. It cited the steward's decision. It was a fact. And that's what makes it so devastating for Sainz. You can't argue with a fact. You can't spin a fact. You can only accept it. And if we're being completely honest, this isn't the first time Carlos Sainz has found himself in this position. The Spanish driver has had a career full of ups and downs. He's been praised for his intelligence and racecraft. He's also been criticized for his inconsistency and occasional lapses in judgment. This incident at Hungary feels like a culmination of both sides of Sainz's career. On one hand, he's a driver who races hard and fights for every position. On the other hand, he's a driver who sometimes makes mistakes that cost himself and others dearly. But here's where I need to pause and consider something important. Is this fair to Carlos Sainz? Is it fair that a social media feature can publicly shame a professional athlete for a mistake they made on the track? The honest answer is probably yes and probably no. Yes, because accountability matters. Athletes are role models. Their actions have consequences. When they make mistakes, they should acknowledge them. When they try to deflect blame, they should be corrected. No, because the social media environment can be incredibly harsh. A community note is one thing, but the comments, the memes, the relentless mockery that follows, that's something else entirely. That's the darker side of this situation. And let's not forget about Oscar Piastri in all of this. The young Australian has been incredibly gracious about the incident. He didn't go on social media to attack Sainz. He didn't complain to the media about unfair treatment. He simply accepted the outcome and moved on. That's professionalism. That's class. But I guarantee you, behind closed doors, Piastri was furious. He had a victory taken away from him, a victory he had earned, a victory that would have meant so much to his career, and it was taken away by a driver who was fighting for 17th place. The irony of this situation is almost too much to handle. Sainz was fighting for 17th place, not points, not a podium, not a win. 17th place. He ruined the race leader's day for 17th place, and then he tried to blame a blue flag system. Now, let me ask you something. Have you ever seen anything like this? Have you ever seen a professional athlete get publicly fact-checked by an internet community in such a humiliating way? Because I haven't. This is a new era of accountability. This is a world where every statement is checked, every excuse is examined, every claim is verified. And honestly, that's not a bad thing. The world of Formula One has always been filled with politics, spin, and carefully crafted narratives. Drivers say one thing to the media and another behind closed doors. Teams present one version of events to the public while knowing the truth internally. But social media has changed all of that. The community has become the ultimate fact-checker, and when a driver makes a claim that doesn't add up, the community is there to correct them. Now, let's talk about what this means for the future, because this incident is a glimpse into how sports media will function going forward. Imagine being a driver in 2026. You make a mistake on the track, you finish 18th, you cost a rival their victory, and then you go to social media to explain yourself. But you know that every word you say will be fact-checked. You know that the community is watching. You know that if you stretch the truth, you'll be publicly corrected. That changes how athletes communicate. That changes how they interact with fans. That changes how they manage their public image. And honestly, that's probably a good thing. For too long, athletes have been able to control their narratives. They've been able to spin stories. They've been able to avoid accountability. But no more. The community has the power now, and the community demands the truth. But let's not forget about the human element here. Carlos Sainz is a real person. He has feelings. He has a career. He has people who love and support him. And he just experienced one of the most embarrassing moments of his professional life. Can you imagine waking up the day after a terrible race, posting an explanation on social media, and then watching as thousands of people mock you for your own words? Can you imagine seeing a community note on your own post correcting you in front of 500,000 people? That's not easy. That's not something anyone would wish on their worst enemy. But at the same time, that's the reality of being a public figure in 2026. When you make a mistake, you have to own it. When you try to deflect blame, the truth will find you. And the truth in this case is that Carlos Sainz caused the collision. He was informed about the blue flags, he had the warning, he had the opportunity to avoid the crash, and he failed. The stewards made their decision, the community made theirs, and Carlos Sainz had to live with the consequences. Now, let's take a step back and look at the bigger picture of this Hungarian Grand Prix, because this race was significant for so many reasons beyond just the collision. Lando Norris finally got his first win of the season. After months of close calls and near misses, the British driver stood on the top step of the podium. He was joined by Max Verstappen, the defending world champion, and Kimi Antonelli, the young Italian who continues to impress. This was a changing of the guard moment. The old guard of Hamilton, Alonso, and others are fading. The new generation of Norris, Piastri, Antonelli, and Verstappen are taking over. And the Hungarian Grand Prix showcased that transition perfectly. But Piastri's story is the one that will be remembered. The Australian driver had the lead. He had the pace, he had the car, he had everything he needed to win. And then Carlos Sainz happened. It's almost tragic in a way. Piastri had done everything right. He had passed his teammate on the opening lap, he had maintained his position through the early stages of the race. He has shown the maturity and skill that makes him such a special talent. And then, a driver fighting for 17th place took it all away. But if there's one thing we know about Oscar Piastri, it's that he will bounce back. He's too talented not to. He's too determined not to. He has the support of McLaren. He has the support of the fans. And he has the skills to compete at the highest level. This setback, as painful as it is, will only make him stronger. And Carlos Sainz? Well, he'll probably think twice before posting on social media again. He'll probably be a little more careful with his words. He'll probably remember the community note that humbled him in front of the entire Formula One community. That's the thing about accountability. It stays with you. It follows you. It reminds you that every action has a consequence, and every word will be examined. So what's the lesson here? What can we take away from this incident at the Hungarian Grand Prix? First, accountability matters. Whether you're a Formula One driver or a regular person, you have to take responsibility for your actions. When you make a mistake, admit it. When you cause problems, acknowledge them. Don't try to deflect. Don't try to blame others. Just own it. Second, the truth always comes out. You can spin a story, you can create a narrative, but eventually the facts will emerge. Eventually, the truth will be known. And when that happens, you'll have to face the consequences. Third, social media is a double-edged sword. It gives athletes a direct connection to their fans. It allows them to control their own narratives, but it also exposes them to public scrutiny. It makes them accountable in ways that were unimaginable just a few years ago. And finally, Formula One is a brutal sport. One moment you're leading the race, the next moment someone else's mistake ends your day. That's the nature of racing. That's the beauty and the tragedy of the sport. Oscar Piastri learned that lesson the hard way at the Hungarian Grand Prix. Carlos Sainz learned a different lesson, one about accountability and the power of the internet. And we, the fans, got to witness it all unfold in real time. Now, I want to leave you with a question. What would you have done if you were Carlos Sainz in this situation? Would you have posted that explanation? Would you have tried to shift the blame? Or would you have just accepted the penalty and moved on? It's easy to judge from the outside. It's much harder to make the right decision in the moment. But one thing is certain. Carlos Sainz will never forget the Hungarian Grand Prix. He'll never forget the community note, and he'll never forget the feeling of being publicly corrected by the very people he was trying to convince. That's the power of accountability. That's the power of the truth. And that's the story of the Hungarian Grand Prix. If you enjoyed this deep dive into Formula One's most dramatic social media moment, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. We cover every race, every incident, and every story that matters in the world of motorsport. And if you want to see more content like this, let us know in the comments, because the stories don't stop here. The drama never ends, and we'll be here to bring you every moment of it.